Log on to our website at cbs4news.com or storm.herald.com, and there's also information on our sister station's website, upn33.com. That's our hurricane hotline right there. You can always call that number, 877-419-CBS4 for information.
And that'll do it for CBS 4 News at 6. Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you right back here at 11 o'clock for CBS 4 News tonight. Now it's time for the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Good night.
Tonight, inside a post-9/11 security fortress, the Republican convention opens in New York to renominate George W. Bush and showcase the party's, quote, moderate side. Will voters buy it? We'll talk one-on-one with tonight's featured speaker, Rudy Giuliani. Also, the Pentagon's new spy case. Israel admits contacts with the suspect, and the FBI searches a pro-Israel lobbying group. And a stormy record, 8 named storms in August, with monster Hurricane Francis now tracking for a possible U.S. hit this weekend.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting tonight from the Republican National Convention in New York.
Good evening from Madison Square Garden, where the Republican convention opened today under unprecedented security. The police have turned this arena and the area around it into a fortress. Earlier today, President Bush's name was officially placed in nomination. Now the convention speakers will try to persuade undecided voters around the country in this tight election to give President Bush 4 more years. And how do they plan on doing that? CBS News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts begins our convention coverage.
And call it to order.
Republicans banged down the gavel today. Police locked down the city, and the convention was underway.
We will leave here with momentum that will carry us to victory in November.
The dominant theme of the convention's opening night is 9/11, a program that will pay tribute to victims and survivors of the attack and remind Americans of President Bush's leadership in the days following September 11th, the critical issue in his bid for re-election.
And the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
For all the Republicans' careful planning, President Bush himself gave his opponents an opening to question his leadership. In an interview aired today, he said of the war on terror, "I don't think you can win it."
Those are not things a strong leader says. A strong leader should talk about, should lead with ideas about how we win the war on terrorism.
The thousands of protesters who took to the streets here are a clear sign that the sense of unity that enveloped this city in the days after 9/11 has been shattered by deep divisions over the president's policies on the war on terror, Iraq, and other issues. In making the case for another 4 years, the Bush campaign must be careful to highlight September 11th, but not exploit it.
To run a presidential election in 2004 and not have a discussion of the meaning of September 11 in terms of our homeland security, our national security, the war on terror would be like running in 1864 and not talking about the Civil War.
Republicans are performing another balancing act this week, offering their base a conservative platform while at the podium pivoting to the center, rolling out big-name moderates like McCain, Giuliani, and Schwarzenegger with a message aimed at a small but crucial slice of voters.
For Bush to put this together, he has got to bring those moderate, independent women back to the Republican fold. That's what this week is all about. These speakers will highlight that, but he's the one that has to close the deal Thursday night.
That combined message of leadership and moderation is being even more narrowly focused heading into the fall. Republican sources say the Bush campaign has now whittled down to 9, the number of battleground states they believe are truly up for grabs. Dan?
John Roberts reporting live from the convention floor. Thanks. As John mentioned, one of the Republican voices of, quote, moderation being heard from the podium here tonight belongs to Rudy Giuliani. The views of the former mayor of New York don't always coincide with President Bush's, but Giuliani is campaigning at the president's side here and elsewhere around the country. Riding a wave of popularity that started in the days after 9/11, Rudolph Giuliani is front and center now in the presidential campaign.
We've been through a lot over the last 4 years, some of the most difficult times in the history of our country.
He's a powerful addition in a close contest, but not one who always sees eye to eye with the candidate. You have, by any reasonable analysis, at least a somewhat different position on gay rights,
abortion, gun control than President Bush. Fair to say.
Yeah. I mean, there are agreements and disagreements with not only with President Bush, but with other members of my party.
There will be plenty of people who say, listen, this is a week in which George Bush and the Bush-Cheney campaign want to come across as compassionate moderates. They put forward Rudolph Giuliani, Arnold Schwarzenegger. But that's not where the party really is. The party's far to the right of that. To that, you say what?
I say the party is much broader than the way in which it's described. Or maybe in the way it used to be even. I mean, we've evolved over a period of time. I regard myself as conservative, very conservative on national defense, on fiscal policy, on taxation. The areas where I feel I'm moderate are the areas of social policy. Pro-choice. I signed the bill giving gays the right to a civil union. I feel people who are gay and lesbian shouldn't be discriminated against.
Despite their disagreements, Giuliani says he's on board.
Are you uncomfortable at all with the attacks on Senator Kerry's war record?
Well, I think his war record should be, first of all, it should be respected. I'd almost say that everybody's falling into a trap, and our issues with him have to do with the way he's handled himself in elective office, not the way he handled himself in the military.
More than 90% of Republican convention delegates say they have a favorable view of Giuliani. So it's no surprise that there was talk of possibly putting him on the ticket instead of Vice President Cheney.
Do you give any credence at all to the possibility of that happening?
Dick Cheney is the vice president. He's going to be the candidate for vice president. I don't think there's ever been any doubt about that. So I think he's helping the ticket.
Giuliani says he's not interested in the vice presidency, but says he will consider other options, including possibly running against Hillary Clinton with the Senate or running for governor of New York and maybe even eventually for president in 2008. Now to the important developments in Iraq today. The radical Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr said he will stop fighting U.S. forces and join the political process in the run-up to January elections. Iraq's economy suffered a blow as sabotage again stopped the country's oil exports. And 2 kidnapped French journalists threatened with death by Islamic militants begged their government to lift its ban on Muslim headscarves in French schools. In Washington today, the FBI pressed its investigation of a Pentagon analyst suspected of passing U.S. secrets to Israel, something the Israeli government has now repeatedly and flatly denied. CBS's Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes broke the story on this broadcast last week. CBS's Jim Stewart is working the story too, and here's what he found.
So far, the investigation appears to focus on the actions of a lone Middle East analyst in the Pentagon who, although he had no influence over policy, did have a top-secret clearance that allowed him access to policy papers. U.S. officials identify the man as Lawrence A. Franklin, who works for Undersecretary for Policy Douglas Feith, who was updated on the investigation over the weekend. The focus of the investigation is whether Franklin passed along highly classified planning papers about U.S. policy towards Iran to pro-Israeli lobbyists who then gave the information to Israeli diplomats. Meanwhile, FBI agents Friday executed a search warrant and interviewed staff members at the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, an influential American-Israeli lobbying group in Washington which has denied wrongdoing. U.S. officials confirm the investigation has been going on for over a year and that Franklin had recently agreed to cooperate with the FBI. The story was first reported last Friday on the CBS Evening News shortly after agents began executing search warrants. U.S. law enforcement officials did not object to the timing of the CBS report.
The question most puzzling the FBI at this point is whether Israeli agents were pushing Franklin for information or whether the analyst was offering it on his own. The distinction could mean the difference between charges of unlawful disclosure of classified material or espionage. Dan?
Jim Stewart in Washington, we emphasize no one has even been charged, much less convicted in this case so far. On the CBS Weather Watch, another major hurricane could strike the U.S. mainland over Labor Day weekend. Today, what's left of Tropical Storm Gaston dumped more torrential rain on the Carolinas. It's one of a record 8 named storms for the month of August. CBS's Mark Strassman is tracking this wet and windy Atlantic hurricane season.
10 inches of rain stung some areas when Tropical Storm Gaston exploded in South Carolina. Howling winds just under hurricane strength left thousands without power. Trees snapped, and one of them jolted Daniel Thomas.
and it bounced me up off the bed. It shook the whole house.